Some great hats, right? Solid hat work. It dips me lid. Well done. Very serious. This is not how I'm used to working. I'm used to taking a place that expects comedy and making it serious, but this is already serious. So I don't know what I'm going to do. Find out. It's okay. Look, I don't know who you are. I have no idea. I've seen a diversity of diversity walk across here, and that is lovely, but ultimately that means I can't even guess who you are. I don't know what struggles or joys life has thrown your way, or what future woe or beauty is ahead of you, and I will not pretend to understand. I'm neither arrogant, smug, or delusional enough to assume that I can. So I'm left wondering, how can I possibly be expected in this moment to offer anything close to salient wisdom? And yet I'll try. When I got my undergraduate degree 20 years ago, I was not ready to be a fully functioning member of society. Much to my dismay, I was ready to be a burden on the welfare system. You can take the girl out of Smithton. That was a loaded joke. Be careful about how and why you laughed at that. The reasons are actually quite varied and complex, but one reason was that I was barely able to speak. And I don't mean this, public speaking, I mean I was barely able to speak. A quiet shout out to all the anxiety sufferers in the room. Yeah, unusual, but yep. Usually they're like, oh, sorry. But you own it. I'm autistic, and as such, anxiety is only ever going to be my constant companion. But honestly, I don't know how it's possible not to be anxious in this world, in this moment, unless you're dead inside, and we don't want that. When my spouse lady, Jenny, sees me struggling in a whirligig of anxiety, she has taken to asking me this question: don't panic, who do you want to be? And that is the wisdom I want to share with you today, a question, and it's not even mine. You're welcome. But I think only a question has the capacity to be flexible enough to be wisdom. Statements are oblivious to the nuance of you. And platitudes are nothing but idea corpses you have to reanimate as best you can. But a question always leaves room for you, so please make sure you bring yourself along for this ride. Don't panic. Who do you want to be? That is the question. I've been a doctor less than a minute and I'm already rearranging Shakespeare, so stick that in your pipe and smoke it. I mean, honestly, it's about time someone did. You know, alive people can write real good, you know, but that's for another time. For now, ask yourself, who do you want to be? Don't ask yourself what you want to achieve. Honestly, the world already decides so much of that for you. Only a privileged few get to set goals and achieve them. It seems otherwise, but that's only because successful people are the only ones who get to speak, and they'd prefer to think they did it on their own. But we know better. If it makes you feel any better, nobody ever fails on their own either. For me, the question, who do you want to be, is one that helps me step back in a moment and think about who I want to be under the circumstances I find myself in, which is not at all the same thing as my identity or how I want people to see me. It is a question that asks me what actions will best reflect who I want to be. So who do you want to be? Do you want to be someone whose ends justify their means? Do you want to be a people pleaser? A little bit of column A, a little bit of column B? Who do you want to be? Can you be who you want to be? Is it your fault? Do you want a cup of tea? Hint, yes. Who do you want to be? Whatever your answer, know that if you ever become that person, it will only be for one hot minute in one tiny universe. Because nothing in this world is ever static, especially not you. More. The person who wrote Nanette also won a Peabody and an Emmy, FYI. Adepts me led to myself. The person who wrote Nanette is not the same person who stands before you today. That person did not know who they wanted to be. They knew what they wanted to say, absolutely, but they did not know who they wanted to be, but now they do. I know who I want to be, and I want to be kind. That's it. It might not sound like much of a goal, but just to be kind is actually more difficult than you'd imagine. I almost regret it. It's a lot of work. And 10 years ago, I did not have the luxury of setting goals. Trauma takes that privilege away from a person. Trauma holds you to each and every moment as a life and death struggle. Trauma takes away your capacity to understand that there is more to life than just fighting against nothing and everything all at once. Trauma takes away your ability to see yourself as a whole person. Trauma had me in its grip for a very long time. I do not live there anymore. I know what life is now. Life is breath. And to be able to take a breath, I need to be somebody, and I want that somebody to be kind. I'm not asking you to be kind. You don't get to hold anyone up to the standards of your choosing. Sometimes people do not have the resources to be who you think they should be. Until you know their history, I don't think it's wise or humane to insert your value judgments upon others. And the reason I think that is because I have an awful lot of experience in that department. Much of what became trauma inside of me is the trauma that was stealing away the very breath of my life began external to me, as value judgments other people forced upon me, having never ever met me. And the further away from Australia, the more work I have to do to explain the geographical situation that I grew up in. And while it is usually enough for me to say that I come from a small island off the south of Australia, there are times I'll need to clarify that Tasmania is not a country in and of itself, but a state of Australia. Sometimes I even have to go further and explain that the reason New Zealand is not Tasmania is because it is New Zealand. And on one incredibly exciting occasion, I had to break the news to an adult human that Tanzania is not a province of Austria. Look, I don't find it insulting that not many people know where in the world I'm from. The point of the exercise is not to expose the ignorance of others, but rather to convey the sense that I grew up a long way away from nowhere. In order to understand my story, you need to know something of this place. Some of you do, some of you don't. You need to know that Tasmania was a convict colony and that it was a devastatingly brutal settlement that decimated the Indigenous population in what can only be described as attempted genocide. You also need to know that I'm a direct descendant of those white settlers and convicts that so violently carved out their new life on this forsaken little island. I am both a benefactor and victim of the arrogance of colonial mentality. Change the date. You need to know that Tasmania only decriminalised homosexuality in 1997. I know a lot of you know that, but it bears reminding. Because it didn't happen without a decade-long fight. And very little was done to dignify the discourse. And too often, those who used the most violent language were given a much bigger platform than they deserved. And that's how homophobia was politicised and weaponised in Tasmania, particularly on the northwest coast. And it was a trick. The trick being the harvesting of hate amongst a depressed, low socioeconomic demographic who were already struggling against intergenerational poverty, welfare dependency, and a criminally low literacy level. And instead of making legitimate investments in the northwest, what was whipped up was a vulnerable community into a frenzy against a marginalised community within that community, manufacturing as it happened an artificial identity of proud homophobia. And that's where I grew up. and that traumatized me. But I stand here before you, happy to say that I am proud of being from the Northwest Coast, and I know that they are proud of me too. So that backfired. Play the long game. And that is why I insist on telling my story. I'm not interested in my own nostalgia. The thing is, I can see these destructive patterns repeating themselves right now all over the world, again and again. The Black Lives Matter movement and trans bodies are being criminalised and demonised as a threat, when all they are asking for is the ability to be able to control who they want to be. It's not much to ask, and yet here we are. When people use the terms the gay agenda or playing the race game, the race card as it happens, cards are a game, playing the race card, what they are doing is projecting their own ideals and tactics onto communities they wish to oppress in the same breath they are calling shotgun on victim status. It's a neat trick, but that's all it is, and I want to spoil it for all that it is. The only communities that have actual agendas and cards to play are those that are interested in power and those whose existence rely on conversion or recruitment, an active process of bringing people into the fold. For example, extremist groups, political parties, universities, and the Christian church. Now, I'm not here to offend those who hold faith in the Christian God. Some of my best friends are Christian, and some of those are queer, so there's that. I believe the freedom to believe is a fundamental human right, and I offer you my humble hand of friendship. But a humble hand is an exchange. It is not an offering of deferential silence, and it is most certainly not a curtsy. And while ever there are groups like the Australian Christian Lobby and people like the Abetz brothers, who for 40 years and still counting continue to use the rhetoric of hate against marginalised communities, particularly in regional Australia, they do not get to hide behind their so-called faith. True leaders stand for people. They don't stand against some people. The LGBTIQ community has never been driven by conversion. We simply want to be able to exist as full and productive citizens, visibly and safely so. We know you cannot convert to Team Us, and many of us have tried to be who and what we are not, and our lives were diminished because of it. I nearly took my own life because of an agenda hell-bent on extinguishing my existence. An agenda that took the accident of my person and demonized it. An agenda that told me that my mere existence was destroying the family unit, even as my own family struggled to keep hold of me, despite only ever being taught the language of rejection. So I ask you, who do you want to be? Do you want to be a leader motivated by acts of inclusion, or defined by measures of exclusion? I can't answer that for you. The answer will live inside your story. And your story is always being written and rewritten, courtesy of the actions you take. Your story is as alive as you are. Never stop paying attention to it. Be alive. Breathe. Be somebody. And try your best to be someone you want to be. Thank you and congratulations.